Hi, good afternoon. My name is Sheri Greenawald, and I'm the Artistic Director for the Marilla Opera Program. And this afternoon, we're very, very lucky because we have two very important people in my life and in the life of the San Francisco Opera right here. I'll go to Miss Eun Sun Kim, our maestro or maestra. Do you mind being called maestro? No.
Anything. You can call me just Eun Sun.
and Miss Eun Sun Kim is our music director designate. She takes the position next fall officially. And we are absolutely, and she's sitting in Korea, so it's very early in the morning for her. So we are so grateful that you're here with us this morning. And we want to welcome Greg Henkel, who is my boss, and who I've been lucky enough to work with now for how many years has it been?
In the company together for about 12 or 13 years,
Well,
and then in our relationship like this for about 3 years now, maybe 4.
Yes, but we've known each other because I know him from a long time ago in
Yes.
Chicago.
Chicago.
That's where I met you. So I'm going to start with Eun Sun because I wanted to talk about the fact that you played piano at the age of 4, right? And I was curious, when I was age 4, I was in the garage on an old piano and I was playing the drum song out of the Thompson piano book, that kind of thing. What were you playing at age 4?
Certainly the same thing, I guess.
No, really?
Well, but my mother wanted, when she was young, my mother wanted to be a musician, but it didn't work out. But whenever she had time, she was able to teach little kids in our small apartment village really the basic skills. So not for money, but just for their hobby. So little children were always in my house and they learned basic piano skills. And somehow, obviously, I played some music from radio by ear. So she noticed my musical talents and it was the beginning. So, yeah.
So your mother was musical?
She was musical, yeah.
And were there other musicians in your family at all?
No, I'm the only one.
I always find that amazing. That's so interesting.
It is interesting. And I must say I'm not really a typical musician, I would say.
We noticed.
I always enjoy, whenever I'm not on the podium, I very much enjoy with my friends talking about anything, everything but music. And I don't have also many friends who are musicians, but they're all physician or like a game programmer or something like that. So we talk about everything but music.
Makes you a much more rounded creature, I'm sure, though. I'm sure of that. Well, Greg, you grew up in New York City area. And, New York is the cultural center of the United States as much as we want to deny it. It's true. So you had this cornucopia of riches near you. What was your first musical memory? What is your first theatrical memory?
Oh,
yeah.
I don't. My first musical memories first, probably folk music, Irish folk music in my home. Was the first thing. Bagpipe players actually at various kind of parties, and that was interesting. And then I started doing shows when I was in 3rd grade. I was a munchkin in the high school production of Wizard of Oz because they needed little people. And that's where the drama bug bit me. And I think I've always been sort of a theater man since then. But I was very lucky to grow up in New York. We had or in my particular school, was very lucky to have a lot of musical training in a public school where we had music history and music theory, a few series of that too, and advanced placement music theory and history, and IPA. I learned IPA in public high school and things along that.
Wow.
Theater history and theater design as well. So, that was probably being very close to New York. That was, in fact, theater and music were more important than sports in my particular school district. So I was very lucky for that. I didn't realize how lucky I was until I get to look back on it. And so I soaked up every moment I could of that kind of stuff. And also being able to go into see opera in Central Park. That was probably my first operatic experience, was Marriage of Figaro in Central Park with New York Grand Opera at the time. And so, it was really wonderful. And then going to the Met, and my last year in high school, I was at Juilliard in pre-college, which was a very small program at the time. There were just 4 of us. And one of the other singers is Kathleen Kim, who is a well-known coloratura soprano these days. And I had even before sort of leaving high school, was lucky enough to have even more advanced theory and history and practicum, and had to do a full-length recital before I could graduate sort of high school at that point. So I feel very sort of, having that at that point in my life did kind of, I know, put me ahead of the game, when it came to this kind of work, because I could start concentrating on other type of things pretty early on in my musical education. So I feel very blessed.
Amazing. I'm going to do a shout out to your high school, Southside High School.
Yeah.
Good work,
Yeah.
I have to say. Eun Sun, you began your studies at Yonsei in Seoul, right?
Right.
And you were at first interested in composition. And I would say that composition would be a really great thing for a conductor to study. And did that influence your work as a conductor?
Well, sure, of course. I studied composition at Yonsei University. But I have to say, not just with composition, but I was always interested in accompanying my colleagues, instrumentalists, singers, all the time.
Yes.
And I think with my compositions or composer's prospect or point of view, I think my singer colleagues kind of preferred to have me for their voice lessons or weekly recitals, as they felt like I approached the piece a little differently as the other pianist, accompanist. So not only having studied composition, but also having spent so much time making either chamber music or accompanying singers,
Yes.
make me, I think, really live in a full score when I studied as a conductor.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because because it did see you accompanied a lot of singers, and I know that's
right.
Yeah. And I know that I always have found that conductors that come from different instruments have different relationships with the singers, with their bodies, interestingly. Here's my one theory. I've always felt like the pianist, you sort of need to watch the elbow, because the pianist always brings that arm down with the elbow. So I always, when they came from the piano, I'm always watching their elbow. But I don't know, did you know John Pritchard? John Pritchard was a circle, and I'm going, I don't know where one is, it's like, okay, I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, I just, coming from the piano, do you think that's a theory that holds water at all, about the different instruments you may come from and how that may influence how you conduct?
Well, I actually, as a composition student at that time, we needed to learn another instrument than piano. So I chose cello that time. And of course, you think? Okay. of course, you have to learn either studying composition or want to become a conductor. You have to ideally learn all the instruments and able to play, but it's not possible. But you said your theory, but my theory is that in every music or every music or every sound begins from breathing. How you breathe and why you breathe. No matter what instrument you use, play or you sing or conduct. So you can't inhale just so loud and fast like this to produce pianissimo. I'm sure that everybody knows, for instance, the beginning of the prelude of Traviata. It has to begin really, really, really out of nothing. But for the conductors as well, when a conductor gives an upbeat for this kind of music, that has to come really out of nothing, that like this is not a beginning for this music. So you cannot give this upbeat based on your loud breath. So you have to show what kind of the entrance, what kind of atmosphere you want, and breathe accordingly. So I really hope that all the young coaches, pianists learn that as well. We often forget we are breathing when you're at piano. We forget that we are breathing now. Because unlikely the singers, we can breathe wherever we want, whenever we want. So it's very often not musically breathing, but just for surviving.
And breath is communication, just the same way. In the way you take your breath, you're communicating something along that way. That's how we collaborate in many ways. There's so much you can share in silence. Yeah. And part of that is the way that you're breathing.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I worked with a conductor. He was a very famous French trumpet player, and he used circular breathing all the time, when they don't actually breathe. I mean, they don't stop for a breath. And so we literally had to drag him into a room. It was his first opera, and teach him how to breathe with us, because he never breathed, because he was constantly circular breathing in his mouth. Mm-hmm. So that was, I'm so glad to hear you speak about breath. And of course, the word in Italian for breath, inspirare. I mean, to breathe in, inspirare. It's the word for inspiration as well. Yeah. So, Greg, when you were in your 20s, both you and I were in New York in our 20s, not at the same time. I'm older. But you worked at Morgan Stanley and I worked at Philip Morris International. And my big thing was I was reading Ms. Magazine, the first editions of Ms. Magazine at my desk. However, I have a feeling you were probably doing something else at your desk. Could you tell us about your time at Morgan Stanley?
Sure. It was a really interesting learning experience for me. I started there when I was 19 in the mailroom, and it was a way I paid for school on my own, and so I needed to, have money to do the things that I needed to do, and I started there. And I worked there, I guess, for the next 4 or 5 years on every single spring break, winter break, summer break, and then full time sort of afterwards in between undergrad and graduate school. And I kind of slowly clawed my way out from the mailroom, slowly but surely, and ended up in a number of different departments along the way. I was on the trading room floor for a summer, which was they had their own trading room floor at the time. And that was that was an interesting experience. And talk about diva training, that's where I really learned how to manage the biggest divas. And so, and then I was in asset management and defined contribution, but for the longest part of my time there, I was in project management, which is essentially kind of what I do today. Mm-hmm. And so it was, building trajectories for projects, keeping track on things, and managing people. And so even when I was 20, when I had finished up my or maybe I was 21, undergrad, and I had went back to full time. And I had, within 3 months or so, 6 direct reports who were all, twice my age. And I grew my beard back. I've had this, since I was 16, I've had a beard, but I shave it off and on. And then when I realized that I was going to be people's bosses, and I was like 12 years old in comparison, I grew a beard, I put my glasses on, and I wore a suit every day. And that was kind of helpful for people to understand. But I found a way to work with everybody and collaborate and inspire. And, I learned a lot about management style actually through experience. Nobody ever told me this is how you do this or this is how you do that. And it was a really invaluable experience. And I know just having that with only music training. I have a bachelor's and master's in music. I don't have a business degree. It was really, though, I think the lessons I learned as a singer, as a musician, absolutely correlated into my business world experience. As I was saying, the way you breathe is a communication. So I knew how to communicate with people. I knew how to listen to people. I could take direction from multiple people at the same time, a conductor, a director, and a choreographer. So I could take direction from that. I was used to working in preparing solo recitals on my own and then having to be so focused and so goal-oriented inside of that, but also working in various sizes of ensembles and finding partnerships through that way. And so I realized that the skills I learned as a musician were not simply to make music alone, but I could take them everywhere I went. And they actually put me ahead of the game against most of the people who had business degrees, because they weren't able to communicate and share and collaborate. And very often, because I was comfortable in front of groups, even though I was a junior on the team or so, I was the one making the presentation. Because I didn't have a problem speaking in public, and even was able to use some of my linguistic skills for small translation stuff. So, but I'd say the benefit of that too was, while I was there and I was working, 80 hours a week, sometimes they were picking me up in a car in the morning and dropping me off at the end of the day, and they were bringing me meals. I was like in a little pen. You couldn't get out of that sometimes, but I could have headphones in. And so I listened to at least 2 operas every day and a recital on each commute. And so I was always listening. And that was kind of what I had been doing. I mean, it was my favorite pastime, was kind of doing that. I remember spending weekends with my old voice teacher, and her husband was a record collector. And so we would go over to their home, and their entire basement level was all recordings, VHS, Laserdisc, cassette, reel-to-reels, CDs, LPs, you name it. It was all cataloged. And they really got me started thinking about ear training, not simply for pitch and this kind of way, but voices. And so we started playing the game, sort of drop the needle, and they would say, what opera is this? Okay, fine. What scene is it? And then fine. And then when you got good at that, they would say, whose voice is that? And so I would start really listening to figure those things out. And then once you got that, they say, okay, so you got that, fine, Leontine Price. Is that mid-career, early career, or late career Leontine, and why? And so then they push you further on that kind of thing. And it was just a game. This is kind of fun. We would do it for each other. And then they would ask, now, who's the conductor? That was always a little bit harder, but you could tell. And sometimes it was a mix of knowledge of understanding who was singing with who at different times could help piece things together. Or sometimes we would listen to 20 people sing the same aria back to back. And listen to what that was and why and what the choices were, and were they choices or were they requirements, or is that the only choice they had, or listen to the same person sing the same role over the course of 20 years and how their voice changed along that way. So while I was doing that on the weekends, I was actually taking that to work and doing that during the work hours, as well as I was getting other things done I could always be listening in that way. And so it was just devouring repertoire for all of those years.
I
So
know,
that's what I was
so
doing.
impressive to me. Like I say, I was reading Ms. Magazine. I don't know what my problem was, but anyway. And son, you went to Germany then from Korea. So that always impresses me. And you went to the Stuttgart Conservatory, right? The conservatory in Stuttgart. Did you already speak German? How did you learn the language? And I just want to know about language study in general, what you would recommend to these young musicians.
Well, in Seoul, I took a class, but as you all know, there are hundreds of excuses not to go to foreign language class when you're when you are young and when you're in your country. So I only ended up getting the very basics, like the article or something to order in a restaurant, or like the numbers, because in German the numbers you have to count differently, that kind of thing. But I had actually, before I went to Germany, I had a clear plan for my time in Germany. And it was not like becoming a conductor. It began actually out of curiosity, because I really wanted to learn the country, the culture, and the language where the music is coming from that I'm doing. So I really wanted to learn this. So that was, Stuttgart was not my first city, but I went to Berlin first. It was all in my plan, only to learn the language, not about like entrance exam for conservatories, but just for learning the language and culture for at least half a year. That was my plan. And then to apply for the conservatories in other cities than Berlin, because I already heard that in Berlin there were so many Korean students. So I didn't want to speak, or I didn't want to hang out with the Koreans. So I looked out like the cities where the least Koreans were there at that time.
Okay.
But at the beginning, I chose Berlin for language and culture, also because there is a Berlin Philharmonic and Berlin State Opera, of course. And first time I heard live in Berlin with Berlin Philharmonic with Untitled Schubert Fifth Symphony, that I really can't forget that moment. And I really wanted to live in this historical city, which had been divided east and west for a long time. It's attracted me as well, because I live in Korea. I'm Korean, so with this situation with South and North Korea as well. So I took the intensive course, German course, which means 8 a.m. till 1 p.m. every day for 6 months. And then in the afternoon and the evening, I was able to go all the museums and concerts halls and operas with reduced price, as I was like a language school student, like €5 for an opera. And I really appreciated that I took that time to understand why I do what I do.
Yes.
Why I do this music and come from this country. And because I believe music can be only written by a composer by his language, by his own nuance, and by his own rhythm. Of course, you can translate the text and pronounce it perfectly as a singer, but you know all music skills and etc. But only through language you can really go deep into composer's world, what he really meant. And well, the practical thing, coming back to the language study, I still learn every day all the languages because they are not my mother tongue. So but nowadays it's so practical with your smartphone to have so many news apps in different languages and dictionaries and podcasts and etc. And I changed the language, the system language, whenever I need, like, for instance, 2 weeks ago, I had a concert in Paris, and I had not spoken French for a long time. So I changed all my system languages in my laptop or in my iPhone to French. And I have been taking an individual Skype lesson as well. And actually this afternoon I have another one because I wanted to profit this pandemic time to learn the language. So I really insist the language. And one of the voice teacher I worked with in Korea, he said, I can never forget that. He said, we were at Schumann im wunderschönen Monat Mai. And he said, you guys will really understand once you lived in Germany why it has to be May, not March, not April, but May. And why it's so wunderschön. You will understand. And really, I heard that in Korea. Okay, well, you studied, like I was thinking, Professor, you studied in Germany. And of course that. When I lived in Germany, I really understood why it has to be May, because in April, there's like a crazy weather. On one day, you can see everything, every possible weather. And then since it comes into May, it is really wunderschön. So then you bridge it differently. You really mean the text, what you are saying. So not everybody is in a place to go or visit the other countries, but at least you can do nowadays, like with our digital technology, you can spend so much time for languages.
What I so admire about Eun Sun is her dedication to language study.
Yes.
And how meaningful it is to her music making and to what we do as opera producers and musicians. And you learn Czech for our production of Rusalka, having not known Czech before. And it was really phenomenal just to hear from all of the singers saying, you know, it's amazing. She knows every single word and she gives me every single word. And I've never worked with a conductor like that before, who was there with me every moment in a language. And that was your first time conducting in Czech. And I just think that is phenomenal. And why you're one of the most impressive people I know in the world today.
Yes, that's why we've got her, right, Greg?
Amen.
That's why we get her, you know. I'll go back to Greg here for a moment. You attended some great schools. I have you down at Juilliard pre-college. I have you at NEC, which is in Boston, great school, and Westminster Choir College in Princeton, which is another great school. But then you did your master's at DePaul in Chicago. And that's where you met someone named Neil Rosensheim. And I think all of that had sort of a large effect on your life.
Yeah, it did. Even before Chicago, I actually met Neil in New York. I was studying with him there. And a really wonderful teacher, a wonderful man, has his wonderful career trajectory. And I had been studying with him while I was working on Wall Street. And at that point, I had kind of, before meeting him, I had thought, I'm going to give up on singing. You know, this Wall Street time is taking so much effort from me, and I couldn't even find time to take a lesson, and no one had room on their rosters. And so I thought, oh, you know, I guess that's the sign. And then I went and saw a movie one evening with a friend, and it was Billy Elliot. And I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but it's one of my favorites of all time. And I left that theater saying, if that little boy can do this, I'm going to give it another chance. And within a week, I met Neil and learned a lot from him. And when he was no longer living in New York, he was teaching out of someone else's, a friend of his, apartment. And I was taking a lesson there, and I looked at a photo, and I said, who's this guy here with Evelyn Lear and Tom Stewart? And he said, that's my friend Matthew Epstein. This is his apartment. He's like, but you know who Evelyn Lear and Tom Stewart are? I was like, yeah, they're amazing. He's like, tell me what you know about them. And I said, well, she did this and this and this and this and this, and he did this and this and this and this. And he's like, really? And then he's like, you're working on Wall Street these days? And I said, yeah. He's like, and you know all that? He's like, and he just kind of like put that in the back. And when he started teaching in Chicago, he invited me out there. He's like, why don't you try teaching or come study in Chicago? It's a lot cheaper out there. It's going to be a new program. You can go to the opera out there. It's a great opera company. Maybe you get a job in the box office or something like that, and see dress rehearsals or something. Could be a great experience. And, as a New Yorker, I thought I'd always live in New York, and I'd always kind of been in that area, but he was so inspiring. I decided to head out there, sort of with him. And I think he saw something that I hadn't quite seen myself just yet. And, while I was in school, I was a little bossy in the way of that, when I was at NEC, I kind of felt like I created a recital series for the freshmen in my studio because there was nothing for us and nothing for most undergrads at that time. And so I felt like I wanted to do something like that. And so I created that, but I also was a theory tutor, and so I was teaching instrumentalist music theory, and I always reminded them afterwards they learned it from a singer. And then I was also a diction coach, both at NEC and what I shouldn't say official coach on faculty, but I had a side hustle, which was doing diction coachings with my friends in my dorm room, and a recital programming business as well, where even graduate students would come to my dorm room and say, like, I've been asked for this, and I would talk to them about personality and musical interest, and then make suggestions that they should take maybe to their voice teacher and talk about that, because I was just obsessed with art song literature and that kind of stuff. So I always had that, and Neil saw a little bit of that, and so I started in Chicago at DePaul, and I was supposed to have an informational interview with Lyric Opera of Chicago on the morning of September 11th, 2001. And I had just moved to Chicago maybe 2 weeks prior, and having just left Wall Street. And so it was, it was a big morning. We did not have that interview that day. I didn't even have a TV. So I didn't know what was happening until I got downtown. But so and Neil got stuck in Chicago. And so we had a lot of time together, and I was able to meet some lyric opera people like Richard Perlman, who was the director of the Lyric Opera Center at that time. And in the end, after a little while, and ended up having another interview, they had offered me a position there of, as an auditions coordinator in the Young Artist program. But I had just started my master's degree only a few weeks before, and I had all of this Wall Street experience, which was, why they were like so eager to get me into a role like that. But I still wanted to be a singer at that time. That was still what I had started out to do. And so I said, thank you, but no. But I said, you know what? I'm thinking you're going to have a new auditions coordinator starting at your busiest time of year. I bet they could use some help. So how about I'm your intern? And they said, well, we've never had an intern before. And I said, well, this is your lucky day because I'm kind of overqualified for that internship. I said, but I'd really like to understand a lot more, and I'd like to be able to be around inside of this theater without stopping my education, and get to go to dress rehearsals and understanding. And I was able to, at that time, I was still working on the audition. So I was sifting through the resumes and the headshots and the rep lists. And I took close note of what people were offering, and also was able to overhear, conversations here and there about what worked and what didn't. And where people were coming from and who they were working with and all that kind of, I'm a very sort of analytical catalog-y type of guy in my mind. And so all of that was what I was doing while working for them. I was also working, understanding inside of myself of what seemed to gel and where did it take people. And then after, I guess 2 years of my internship there, I was offered, I won the Opera America Fellowship for Administration, which is a really wonderful opportunity, but at the same time had been offered a position at Lyric Opera in the rehearsal department. And Matthew Epstein, wonderful mentor of mine in the long run, said, listen, you can work for me now or like next year by the time you do this rehearsal department thing, or 10 years if you go and do this, that, other thing. He's like, make up your mind. And so I decided, you know what? Everyone says this rehearsal department gig is the place to learn the most about day-to-day operations in an opera house. It's the heart center. Everyone has to somehow go through there. It makes the daily schedule every day. And so I was part of scheduling and also artist support services. So I came from an artist services background in that way. And at that time I was thinking, I'm not sure I maybe still want to sing, maybe I don't want to sing. I'm not sure. But it was at that time that towards the end of my internship and thinking about this Opera America Fellowship, which they encouraged me to do, Bill Mason, at that time, the general director, invited me to his office. And it was sort of like an exit interview from the internship. And he said, I know you want to be a singer. He's like, but, I want to offer you something else as an idea. He's like, from what I've heard about you and the kind of things that I've seen you do, I think maybe one day, if this year you do something in the rehearsal department, maybe a season or two, and then a couple of years you do this kind of work, and a couple of years later you do this kind of work, I bet in about maybe 25, 30 years time, you could probably run your own opera company. And I was like,
Oh no.
Oh.
It looks like he's crying. We don't want that. Oh no, he may have to phone back in. I think that's so fantastic hearing about that.
It really
journey,
is.
Well,
Yeah.
we pray that he gets back in. In the
Sure.
meantime, I'll come back to you, Eun Sun, and I will say, I've been in this business 50 years, and 30 of them as a soprano. And in that, the number of times I had a woman in the pit, I can count on one hand. With the advent of this new demand for equality and justice, do you think women will finally come into their own in this profession? There he is, he's back.
yeah, sorry, this happened yesterday too. I kept on getting, Zoom keeps on rebooting for some reason. Maybe
Do
it's
we
my-
want Greg? Do we want
But
Greg?
maybe let's let him, and then we'll come back to that, Eun Sun, is that
Sure.
okay? So Greg,
sorry
finish your
about that.
story.
Well,
You're with,
so
you're
I was with Bill,
Mason.
and he kind of said, I know you want to be a singer, but if you were to do this kind of work and then this kind of work and then this kind of work, it kind of drew out a line, a trajectory. And he's like, I bet in 25 years, 30 years, you could run your own opera company one day. And I had never thought of anything like that. In fact, maybe some of my colleagues in school had said something like that, but I took it as an insult, quite honestly. I thought they were trying to say I couldn't sing very well. So I didn't understand it was of my sort of slightly bossy nature. Maybe bossy, we'll find another word eventually. But a bigger picture thinker, that I thought to myself for the first time, like, instead of just being in charge of or responsible for my few notes in the evening, one day, if I'm lucky, if I put the work in, if I learn what I need to learn, I could be thinking about the entire event on stage instead. And that was exciting. And I thought to myself, I took that moment and to look inside deeply as to what maybe I was really meant to do. And I was happy I had done everything up to this point that I had done. But I thought, am I supposed to be a singer? Is that me? Is that my true personality? Because I found, as I thought about it in those moments, to even think about doing the Opera America Fellowship application, you know, I like singing, and I'm okay at wood, I guess, but I really love listening. And you know what? I think it's my personality to give direction more than take direction. And I know that as a singer, something you always are going to have to do for the rest of your career is kind of take direction. And I could, and I was very good at taking direction, but only from a select few. And I thought to myself, I knew where I sat in the market. That I could figure out at that point. I said, I'm not going to be working at Lyric Opera of Chicago. And I'm not going to be working with the types of conductors and directors that I can easily take direction from. And so maybe this is not what I was meant to be doing, but I couldn't find what this next step was had I not gone through everything that I'd come to that point. So I thought, okay, I'm going to see what this is like. And as soon as I opened that door just a little bit, every door and window opened up to me wherever I was, because I think it was finally what I was meant to be doing. And then sort of the universe took this experience of this Wall Street business administration background, as well as my insane opera nerdery, and did that on its own. Like, there was no one who could have planned for that. But when I started to see, oh, that is something, and people want to know what I think they should be singing. Even the young artists at Lyric Opera were coming and asking me about repertoire before they would ask their colleagues. And I didn't think what that meant for a little while until then I kind of understood. And even when I was going out singing in a couple of small festivals, I was probably a little, less than charming when I was talking to people running it. Like, you've got great singers here, but they're all in the wrong roles. Don't you see you should put this person here and this person there and person there? And the way you're scheduling this, does this make a lot of sense to the trajectory we're going with this project? And rather than like hitting me in the side of the head, they said, tell me more about what you have. And I thought, okay, maybe this should be a sign of something. So that was my Chicago Neil kind of excursion that led me to where I am today.
Well, I think that's fantastic. And it's so wonderful that you in that position have had all this background, that you actually had the training that went with that, with the love of the art form.
I think it helps me manage artists, having been an artist and loving artists. These were my best friends. Growing up, I know the trials and tribulations. I respect them. I've gone through them. I know what it is like, and so I think that's an important thing. And I can still feel when I listen, sympathetic vibration and understanding, and my larynx moves and with all of you, and I feel you at the same time because of that.
Yeah, I know.
I have to say the Rusalka team was really one of the best team I could ever had, really.
Thank you.
And that was your work, Greg. I know you thought about all the voices, all the harmony in this team, and also personalities and all artists, not just voice producers. And that was really amazing time. And I kind of, as a conductor, I kind of felt that you wanted to give a conductor like the best ingredients for a cook. And knowing that you are not going to cook, you offered everything like at best. And then kind of imagining, you had already, I think, your own imagination. And that fit our imagination. I think that fit together. So that was really the first, but also the most wonderful experience for me in San Francisco.
And it was beautiful.
Yeah.
We loved it.
Thank you.
Well, I'll get back to the question I had started to ask about the fact that having sung 30 years in the business and maybe only worked Simone Young, you know, maybe 3 female conductors in my entire career. So can you maybe speak to that, and how can we get women into these positions?
I think, there had been so few women because progress takes time.
Yeah.
We are part of a culture of many cultures where women weren't seen as viable leaders for a very long time. This is not just in music, of course, in politics, in business. People are still getting used to the idea, I think, of women leading. And as our young generation of women conductors are coming up in the field, I think I hope we will see more and more cracks in that ceiling as well, of course. And I used actually the story of my grandmother at my announcement. My grandmother was born in 1912, and she passed away 2012. So she lived 100 years. She was one of the most, one of the earliest, like the first women doctors in Korea. So she started like in 1930s,
Amazing.
I think. And she was always called like women doctor, or woman doctor, or female doctor. But she got to see, before she passed away, the world. We don't necessarily call female doctors anymore because there are so many. We just call doctor. So
Yes.
I hope it's going to be just so normal, and that I don't get so many questions anymore about female conductors. Because, you know, the thing is, they ask me so many questions about being female.
Yes.
What is the difference? Is it harder to be a female conductor than a male conductor? And what is the difference, etc.? I have always said, I don't know, because I always have been a woman. I can't compare that. And anyway, the job conductor is, or being a leader is, no matter, regardless of gender, I think it's a hard job. It requires many things, and it's as difficult as whether you're a man or a woman. It's equally difficult, I think. So it's not about the question of gender, but how you take this job.
With most orchestras that you work with, for instance, I've had a long relationship with the San Francisco Symphony, and I have watched as the orchestra has become more female, you know, more varied in all kinds of ways. And so, do you feel that when an orchestra has more women in it, is the response from the orchestra in a difference, or is it always the same? I just wonder if the predominance of women in an orchestra would change the stroke of the orchestra somehow.
You mean the female musicians?
Yes, lots of females in the orchestra as opposed to an all-male orchestra, you know. I wonder if it changes anything.
I don't think, and honestly, I have not thought about it because I don't have time on the podium to think about that. I only have time to rehearse and to work it out, and about music. Surely, well, it's a funny story. In San Francisco, actually, when I was rehearsing with the orchestra reading, during the break, I went to toilet, restroom, and one of the musicians was a woman. She told me, I have never imagined that I see a conductor in my life in a women's bedroom.
That's good.
So
That's
Well,
true.
here I am.
Here you are. Thank God. Thank God.
Well,
Did you participate in the Dallas Women's Conducting Conference?
No,
Did you ever do that? I must say, we had some contact with them, with the Adlers, and I have to say, I was so impressed with them, and I was so impressed. I was impressed with Nicole Paymont and how she dealt with them physically. I thought that was very interesting, and just go women power, go women power.
Amen.
Because I of course, I consider myself a part of a discriminated against minority, and that's women.
Well, but
because like I say, I had the first Ms. Magazine on my desk. I know that.
I think it will change as well. But the fact is, I'm not really. I'm kind of by nature. I think I'm a positive person.
Yes,
and
you are.
Optimistic. So I really don't care that much. But when I met my manager, my agent for the first time, like 11 years ago, the first thing he said to me was like, hey, "Nice to meet you, Miss Kim." And then he asked me like, "Do you have patience?" So he's an Austrian, so in a way, kind of really strict. "Do you have patience?" And I said, "Yes." And no matter what, she just asked me, and I said, "Yes, I have. I am patient." And he said, "Well, he's, by the way, also agent of Simone Young and Karen Kavinsek and all the female conductors." And he said to me, "Well, let's be realistic, because you are a woman, you are an Asian, you are small, you are young. So just in order to be at the start line with everybody else, you have to be like 4 times better than anyone. And then nobody can guarantee that you would start your career by then, even though you would be at the start line with all the others." So he was just giving me a realistic situation, what we are living. So, well, but I just thought if it's the world that I'm living in, I'm just gonna accept it, and then I'll do my job, just going straight. Yeah.
And she is 4 times better than the others. So that's how she did it.
She is.
And so you just have to be 4 times better. Now we know. So I wanted to go to Greg because I think this is so interesting. Your first cousin, is a voice casting director at Disney. So here you are, both 2 people in the same family casting vocal things.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I mean, there's not a lot of music in the family. In fact, there are 3 musicians and of very different types, but all. But my cousin Jason did voiceover casting for a number of the Disney Pixar animated films.
Wow.
And so it was kind of fun to have that. And my dear friend from high school, who was my prom date, and we used to do shows together back in the day, she is a big time Broadway casting director and cast the original Hamilton, back in the day. And also we collaborated some on, her agency had reached out to me when they were casting Porgy and Bess on Broadway, because I had cast it in Los Angeles and in San Francisco. And so they were looking for things, but they didn't go any operatic route that way, but I had worked on it so much. And then we ended up collaborating together on our Showboat back in 2014, because I needed to cast a few comedians who needed to, sing, dance, and joke. And so it was kind of fun that way. It's a small world, but I think, it's Eun Sun had brought up ingredients, before about casting. And one of the things I think around my family in this way is food service, and it is big. I come from a chef background. My father's a chef. My uncle was a chef as well. And I think about that when you're pairing voices and timbres is a lot like flavor, and what works best together and what flavors bring out the best components of each other. Sometimes you're putting things together and they just clash, and other things, they bloom. And I just remember, what Julia Childs, my father would always say, and she would say 90% of good cooking is fresh ingredients. And so when I'm casting, that's kind of what I'm thinking about, is finding the freshest ingredients there and making the flavor profiles kind of fit together vocally, but also personality and matching character-wise too. And what's the timbre of that character that goes along with this ensemble as well, and how they're going to work together.
Well, I think we have questions now from our Marilini. So I think we're going to have one from Gabriel Hernandez. He's coming up here. He's making his way to the screen, and he will be our Mr. Owens in Postcard from Morocco next summer. Hi, Gabe.
Hi.
Hello,
Hi,
Gabe.
dear.
Hi.
What question and for whom would you like to ask it?
My question's actually for Greg. I was so inspired to hear about how much listening has informed your ideas about being an artistic director. And I was wondering, when you are listening to young artists and hearing them develop in their careers, what are some things that you listen for that are developing with those careers?
Yeah, it's interesting because you do have to, when you're listening to young artists, I'm always, for the most part, I'll hear young artists fairly often, especially if they're in programs. I'll visit a program each year and see how that trajectory is going. Once you leave young artist program world, getting on audition is a little bit harder. I don't hear people more than every 3 to 4 years, but if you're in a certain age, it helps me kind of figure out when it's time to open the bottle of wine, when it's aged just right for certain repertory. So I think along that way, but some of the things that I'm always looking for in every voice is stability, that absolute, tonal stability and timbral stability, pitch stability, all of those kind of things, and even range up and down, no holes in the voice, because then at least I can trust that I can move that voice into different things as I need. Those are very sort of elemental types of things, but also I would say, what is it that, do they have something to say? Or that's also the other kind of piece of it. Is there something there? Are they singing the notes, or are they telling me a story, or are they communicating an emotion to me? Because that's what we're doing. Music is wonderful, and I love it, but what we're after is sharing emotional experience. If we go back, I think about this often when I occasionally lose sight of why we do this insane thing every day, but I try to remind myself each morning, So the Florentines, when they created opera, were trying to recreate Greek drama. And so what were the Greeks after? So I take a step back and say, what were the Greeks after? What was drama for them? And it was a religious experience, for one. And then secondarily was really about catharsis and learning about ourselves through a deep emotional experience that almost can't be put to words. And so that's what I'm looking for, is that ability, or at least the possibility that could come later if there is something to speak. But if the stability isn't there and that kind of flexibility, the message gets blurred. So it has to be that the pathway to the message has to be clear and even and stable. And then there has to be a message. If you don't have both at the same time, it's not as meaningful. Either it's too blurry to hear the message, or it's perfectly clear, but there's nothing to say. And so it's both of those things at the same time that I'm most interested in.
Yes. All right, Gabe, was that good?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you. Good to see you, Gabe.
Nice to meet you.
And I think we have Catherine coming, I think someone, maybe Catherine is coming up, I'm hoping. Someone is coming, I promise. They're getting some.
Well, in the meantime, Eun Sun, I mean, what do you, when you're looking for, hearing young artists and starting to work with people, what are the keys that you find most important?
I'm 100% agree with you, Greg. Really, there was really that I always am looking for, really. But I was going to, while another Marilyn is coming, I actually wanted to ask you, Greg, because I know that many young singers, especially, who are thinking about already like Fach changes and going like in other directions as well. I saw a soprano who has 2 kids now. She always hoped that her voice would be going in like in a little heavy directions, even after a second kid as well, second birth, but it never went. Her voice just stays as she started, like in 20s. So you never know how the voice will develop, actually. And I was just curious, do you feel, or do you sense that kind of
Yes.
thing in the voice color as well?
Yeah, I can hear that in the color. Sometimes if it reminds me of a singer from the past that I've gotten to know and try to wonder if it's going to be a similar trajectory. Some things I just feel very instinctually inside of my bones where that voice is likely going to head that I can't always describe. It's become a bit, doing it for so long and it becoming so ingrained, it's quite second nature. It's not always able to talk about, but you kind of sense where, there are things always to work through and towards, but it's like when you watch those HGTV shows, like The House Has Good Bones, or, and you can build on it, or if it's a little unsturdy. And so still stability, even if you have to work through that, if you can feel it's going to be there, then you can start wondering how a voice might grow. And then there are things that are external things like hormonal effects from having children that you don't know could have an effect. And I've noticed that, from time to time with other singers too.
Well, I'm going to introduce you to Catherine Good, who is a coloratura soprano and will sing The Lady with the Hand Mirror next summer.
Yes. Hello, hi. Nice to meet you all too. My question is for Maestra Kim. I would love to know if there's a certain era of music that speaks to you more than others, and if so, or if not, what would a dream season be for you to conduct?
Well,
nice
I always say my favorite piece is what I'm doing now. Yeah.
Good answer.
Because you really live in the score. You really fall in love with this composer, with the roles, with the singers, with the whole theme. And it becomes always my favorite. And of course, I think when I speak with my, for instance, German colleagues or European colleagues, based on their history and everything, they sometimes say, some German colleagues say, like, I don't understand Sibelius at all. Or like French colleagues, I don't understand Wagner at all. So they just don't listen to it. But it's not like just a musical favorite, but it's based on history as well. But I think in a sense, the Americans and the Koreans, I think we have kind of an advantage that we can kind of absorb every culture in same distance, not like based on if you would have asked me, do you prefer Japanese music or Chinese music? Then I would say something, because our country has history as well. So different feeling. But in terms of music making or opera, I think in that sense, we have kind of advantage, and to do it like just as you digest it.
Mm-hmm.
Though, because I started conducting, I didn't know that I was going to be a conductor. And just like in Greg's case, like I had a mentor who told me, you should be a conductor. I was shocked, but that was my teacher in Korea. And I learned in our college production, La Bohème, I learned there how to beat 1, 2, 3, 4. So it was really the beginning of my conducting study at all. Mm-hmm. So whenever I do again Bohème, it just feels like home. Uh-huh. That's the one specific piece that I really feel differently than the others. Yeah.
Cool.
That was my first. There was the first opera I saw with my cousin in it, and with Simon Estes singing Colline.
Wow.
My cousin went to school with Simon, and it's the first opera I was in, and I was a mother. You naughty children are an awful bother. Yeah, I was a mother. Yes. So
that's amazing.
Anyway, Catherine.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
find,
Catherine.
and something that you had said, I found meaningful too, that, as Koreans, as Americans, we come to it with a broad palette. And I have worked with conductors at times who can only see it one very specific way. This is the only thing that is Violetta. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, having listened to as much Traviata and with so many different types of sopranos singing Traviata, I said, I can say, well, that is one way, but then there's this way, and there's this way, and this way, and this way, and they're all valid in a different kind of lens. And so I'm glad that we come to this in that way, and not too dogmatically, as this is the only way to sing this music or this way. There are things that must be done, but that's different. That's accuracy, and things like that, rather than style types of voices and types of personality and looks and feels.
Yeah.
I'd like to introduce Miss Audrey Chait. Audrey is our director, our Marilla. She will be our apprentice director, if you will, even though she's directed a lot already in her day. Anyway, Miss Audrey, how would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, Sheri. This question is for Maestro Kim. And conducting involves so many different kinds of leadership that are vastly different. And I was just wondering how you would describe your own leadership style and how that's developed over the course of your career thus far.
I think that question goes to third person who worked with me because I never thought about my leadership. I think I always try to concentrate in music, what the composers want to tell, and what my interpretation, what my own interpretation in it is. Because I learned the teacher who told me I should study conducting, he always told me that the sound comes from the musicians, from the singers, not from conductor. Of course, I've got a kind of the baton, and they all start after my beat, and then with my beat they have to end. That kind of authority we have. But everybody else in the production is all professional. Also like stage directors and all the lights, and not only performance. And my job, I think, as a conductor is not only to lead or to give a big picture, but also to have them give their best in their profession. So I'm just, and for that, I think the best way is that we really concentrate in music, what we are doing and discuss. And then, well, when I was young, of course, younger, it becomes so many things, and especially in opera, unlikely in symphony, because in symphony you just rehearse 2 or 3 rehearsals, and then it remains more or less same on the stage, so there is no big exception. But in opera, you never know what's going to happen this evening. So I visit the dressing room every single night before the performance, how they are doing, how the singers are feeling. And sometimes they ask me, I really feel tired today, so can we go this and that tempi? And then, okay, I'll do it. And then in the performance, they do just the opposite. So I always say to the orchestra, I love voices. I mean, voice is my favorite instrument. I love the singers, but I don't trust them.
Oh.
Because you also never know. Before you go on stage, you feel like that, but on stage, it's different. It's all different. So that's also what attracts me in the opera, because it's so live and you never get same result. So I think going back to your question, I think it's just concentrating on music, concentrating on our teamwork is my leadership.
As that third-party witness in Sun's leadership, I can say that what I find so refreshing and inspiring about how she does what she does is that she welcomes everyone into the process in a very inclusive way that is a supportive leadership style that allows for people to be able to do their very best kind of work. And they want to, they want to give to her, to the process, and be a part of it. And she recognizes every aspect of this ever most collaborative art form. It's not just the pit and just the stage, it's behind the stage, it's the side of the stage, it is the offices above the stage, that she understands the roles that they play in getting to do what we do. And I have to say that is a very rare leadership quality. And I am so grateful to have some.
Oh no. I think Greg may have died on us here again today. He'll be back. He will be back.
I was glad. I'm so grateful that I appreciate Greg for saying it.
So is that good, Audrey?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Audrey.
I think we have a mezzo coming, and hopefully Greg will get back with us live soon. Our mezzo that's coming lives in Chicago, and she will be our cherubino next summer.
Hi, Gabriela.
Gabriel, where did she go? She was there first. There she was. Hi, Gabriel.
Hi, how are you guys doing?
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi. So my question is actually for both of you. If Greg is able to get back on, but the question. Oh, he's back. Perfect.
Here's a question coming.
Great.
So, what is the first thing that both of you guys do?
Now hear you speak. This meeting.
So sorry, I'm trying to.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
Camera again. At least then what I do is I can still continue the conversation.
Of course.
Is that working? Great.
Perfect. So my question is as follows. So when you guys are faced with learning a new opera that you've never seen before, what is the first thing you do when you crack the score?
Well, you mean to produce an opera I haven't done before, or even just learning. It's been a long time since I've had to learn a role, but I have had to learn a number of operas for the first time, and sometimes I've had to cast and learn an opera before it's even written. What I try to do, I'm a very oral person, so I try to listen, and I try to listen to it enough and as many different kind of recordings as I can so that it's inside of my body, that I don't need to think about it anymore, that I can simply feel. So, and it's how then I go and try. It's like having paper dresses on people in this way. So when I hear, having listened so much to so many different things like that, those roles are inside of my body at the moment. So when I can start envisioning them on other people, like putting that paper dress on the stick figure, and from the way they're singing, whatever they're singing, like the roles I have come to sort of feel inside of my body, then I can take them and put them on other people and then hear in my imagination what it will likely sound like coming from that voice. So for me, I listen a lot first. If I have never produced it, I try to find it on stage, because on recording can hide a lot of things. You have to think about orchestration and the size of your theater that you're producing in. So those are kind of things that, because so many voices can be sung by so many different types of singers, but there's so many factors that go along with it. Like, what size is the theater? Is it a supportive conductor? Is it a supportive director? What is the set like? Is it wide open, or is it something like a funnel that'll help the sound get out? So I try to then experience it live so that I have those understandings, which I could look at the score and see and note that, but I have to feel it, because it's that vibrational memory that then I can take with me wherever I go. So I think that sound means a lot to me in that way. It's how I kind of relate to the world. So I think that's my answer.
Eun Sun, could we get an answer from you, Maestro?
Yeah, well, I studied first the text. I read it like a novel that I understand. And why I'm doing it is I read it loudly, really. And why I'm doing it is because every person has different speed of speaking. And when the composer gives like a tempo indication, whether it's a metronome or allegro non troppo, or whatever it is, he thought in his tempo, reading it or speaking it in music. And when I read it, and I feel like I would speak it a little faster than the composer, or a little slower than him, then I have to figure out what he was really meaning with this atmosphere, or based on this history or whatever. I figure out, and then of course the usual process with structure and everything musical. And then I listen to as many CDs as possible, as many recordings as possible, because every single conductor or performer or singers have also different kind of rhythm, and also different ways. Like Greg said, there's this way or that way. And then we have also in operas traditions. So I always, when a singer comes up with tradition, this is tradition to hold this fermata or whatever. I always say, well, the tradition was once an interpretation, and then this interpretation became a tradition. So it really necessarily means there's this one way to do it, but it was the singer who did that, and it became tradition. So you really have to sing it first without any rubato, without any fermata, without any tradition, and find your way. So that's what I am doing prior to the rehearsals. So I sing it myself. I'm not a professional singer, but I just try to sing it. And then what kind of phrase would be suitable in this passage or whatever. And then with the recordings, I figure out what kind of conductor or what kind of recording would be suitable for my imagination, or kind of I find it really fresh ideas from one recording. If I do for the first time, since it was your question, I don't have experiences with that piece, but like the old conductors may have conducted that piece maybe 20 times or 30 times. And there has to be a reason that they take this tempo or that tempo based on their experiences. So I kind of steal their experience to my first choice, and then I can develop it from the second time as well, because I have my own experiences. And I prefer to listen first to the oldest recordings, which means the closest to the composer's time, not today's recordings, but really like from death. There's conductors or dead artists who may have had kind of more sense of the composer's time. So I begin there and then come back to today. Then I know also why it became like this and how the tradition developed and etc. Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I think we have, not sure, it might be another Gabriel. We have lots of Gabriels in this summer coming up. I was always fascinated by listening to Toscanini recordings of Puccini, because so often modern conductors will make Puccini so slow and lugubrious, and yet Toscanini was like, and we're done.
Yeah.
I appreciated that. But I know Albanese, I guess my friend knew Licia Albanese well, and she said she always had to go to Arizona and recover after recording with Toscanini for a month. She'd have to go and recover because he was so demanding of her.
Yeah.
So this is our wonderful Laureano Quant, who is sitting in Colombia, and he will be our Figaro next summer. He's been studying with none other than James Morris, and he is also a composer.
Okay.
Yes. Hello. So I'm very curious about your opinion about this, because it's one of the problems that maybe we young artists and singers have to deal with, and that is style. So it's closely related to what you were talking about just now. And is there something in the notation that can give us a hint of what a style is? Because one of my biggest concerns when in my composer life was notation. How do I notate this so I can get this result? And, you know, like notation in the 21st century can be very specific, but that doesn't happen in scores of the 19th century or maybe earlier scores. So how can we trace the style, or is there anything that we should looking for a style when we are studying a score?
I think it's, well, I believe, I talked to Gabriela, was that right? As well about the language of composer as well, and the tempis. What I think is the perfect tempo, kind of, there is no perfect in or objective things in art, but still what I think it's the best tempo is when we took speaking tempo. When we can speak it anymore, I think sometimes you can feel it really boring, or sometimes it's too fast. You really have to think. I'm not only talking about opera, but also symphony. And in order to sense that or know that, you really have to sing it. Whenever I meet the conductors, the old conductors or great conductors, they always said to me the same thing. You have to really sing it before you conduct it. You have to try to sing loudly, really, until you're getting tired. Then you know if it's, and all the notations that you might say, of course, in Verdi, Puccini wrote everything he wanted. Really, like in a bar, you can find 3 or 4 notation differently, like on a separate note, even like poco affrettando and then ritardando immediately and everything. He wanted that, but in Verdi you can find it less. But whenever you speak the line, you can just go as natural as I guess he wanted, because he very much went from language as well. And of course, to find the style, it's not only the score, but you really have to read the books from his time, like for Traviata or whatever, Rigoletto, when he wrote it, what kind of time he was going through, and why that style became that, what time was that, what epoch was that, and how the social problem was, and etc. That all combines to understand the style. Yeah. Greg?
And now, you're a composer. Another question do you have, Laureano?
No, it was just that, because we composers tend to think very on the page. When I was writing my pieces, I was very interested in, okay, so I need to write this very specifically so the performer knows more or less what I want. But as we know, paper is something that is not alive.
Of course.
And when music becomes alive is when you actually perform it. So that's what I wanted to ask, because our interpretations as maybe, composers, that we are so into the score and trying to figure out why this guy put this, I don't know, tie or this articulation, or is there something behind? I'm always asking that. And I wanted to know, what was your opinion about this style in that sense?
Well, I wanted to ask something related to this question.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we all know the Charles Mackerras recordings of Mozart with lots of ornamentation. What is your feeling about ornamentation in Mozart? I mean, he really is cuspy in a way. So I just am curious.
Or ornament?
Yeah, with Mozart.
Or like the high notes, which is not written, but many singers sing. It's not my personal opinion. I'm for those when we have the singer who can sing it.
Good answer.
I'm pretty much for it, like as it's written, but still would really have a singer. For instance, I did bel canto piece, like a Sonnambula, and I had a soprano who is able to sing every possible coloraturas or whatever, cadenza and whatever. And people can enjoy it. Of course, it's a little bit out of the context, could be, or I don't know, like out of this really as it's written, but it's somehow, it's also the cadenza or ornament. It itself, we can enjoy it. It is, as it is, like art. It is art. So I'm pretty much for the singers, as you know, Greg, but only if they can.
Yeah, I'm fairly flexible, though. I always prefer less than more, and I think as long as it has meaning, yes, or a theatrical purpose, then I'm more willing to go down that road. But I'm fairly conventional, especially when it comes to Mozart. But I'm open to stylistic, style changes or interpretation of what is considered proper style. I've seen change over the decades just by listening. and what was considered Mozart style in 1940 is not what's considered Mozart style today and even in the 80s. And so, I understand there's a difference there. I've enjoyed all of it, along the way. So I rarely say no as long as it's good. I like the taste. I'll eat it all up. And then it's, for my job, since I'm actually not making it, I'm providing the ingredients. What I want for instead is someone who could do it or not do it, or who will follow what the collaboration is desiring from both the conductor and the director. So it's not that the rule comes from me, and I hope that there are no hard and fast rules so much as discussion about what could be there and how to get there. And so, but yes, there are styles, and those are important styles. But inside of that, I like a little flexibility, Yeah.
I used to, Eun Sun, when I would sing, I've sung both Susanna and the Countess, and I would go back and forth. I always used more ornamentation when I was the Countess, because I felt she would be, more to the court, as it were. And Susanna would be plainer spoken. So I sometimes would use ornamentation as a way to ornament the character, if you will, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
and the same way, you could turn that around and have very busy ornamentation for Susanna, who's always on her feet, running all over the place. And you could have less, but still more stately ornamentation for someone who has the nobility of the Countess. And so, but also then looking what Mozart did for himself, like what are their forms did he use for each of those characters? What was a kind of fioritura that he wrote for each of those characters? Because there is in your clue of what their status is in that society, and did he write dance forms for their arias, or is it something more through composed? And what does that tell you about his interpretation of those characters and how they play in the story? But even inside of that, you can play around depending on the nature of that production.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of style, Oriana, because you're a composer, what I because I studied composition, my teacher at my college, because I had kind of difficulty to find my own style. So I was 19, and unless you're Mozart, it's like just so she gave me kind of mission in my first 2 years, which was imitation. So she gave me like a mission. Now, in the first half of this semester, you write like Mozart style, and the next one was like Haydn style. I didn't understand it. Okay, Haydn and Mozart differently. I get. But then you really have to listen to the composer, really sticking to the composers, and then still create your own music, but sounding like Mozart. And then Haydn. And then we went to like a romantic and then impressionist, so Debussy and etc. That 2 years, I think, helped me a lot to find my style, because then, as you said, like in notations or whatever, you find really how the great composers went when they wrote something. So maybe there could be an idea. I'm not just forcing you, but I mean,
no, sure. Thank you very much.
Idea that you stick to one composer, learn it, and then the other, and then comparing into what it could be, and it all related, coming back always to the language, always language. It's
yeah. Well, he's probably going to write a rumba or two because he's fascinated with Cuban music. He loves Cuban music.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
Do we have another question out there? Okay, but I think we had a question from the audience, but I didn't get to read it, so I'm all screwed up with that, I'm afraid. I wanted to ask you two. Oh yes, here it is. What was there? We have from Sarah Neely. I'm so interested to know, what was your early inspirations? What were your early inspirations?
Well, I think it was just so natural that I came into music. So I really didn't have any muses or fantasy that I am going to be like this or that. Because when I was still playing piano, I was so nervous every time on stage. Like my hands were shaking, even my feet as well. Like when my right foot was on the pedal, it was like shaking.
Okay.
So it's but so I never thought that I could be a professional pianist because I was so nervous on stage. But then ever since I studied conducting or became a conductor, I'm never nervous. I don't know why, but it's it was meant to be, maybe.
That was meant to be.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the sign.
Yeah, but I never left music, so it was just so natural that
You always lived in that bubble of music. You just
Yeah.
have lived there your whole time.
Yes.
We have someone else. We have Philippe L'Espérance. We love this name. So he's going to unmute his mic and come forth. Here he is. This is
Hello.
the tenor.
Hello.
How you guys doing? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm a huge opera nerd, obviously. I love the lesser done stuff always, like new works and older works like Meyerbeer, all that kind of stuff. When you're approaching pieces of newer productions, or newer compositions or pieces that aren't done ever, is there a different way in which you would approach putting those on, or do you generally have the same approach just in the different circumstances?
In terms of score studying, it's the same thing. The advantage of that is that you have a living composer you can talk with.
Yeah.
So
sometimes that's helpful, sometimes that's not.
helpful, yes, sometimes not. But still, I usually don't ask for a MIDI file, which many composers want to provide to know the tempo, etc. But I liked to prepare it on my own and then have conversation with the composer. And I have never conducted actually a new opera, like the contemporary opera, which is like a world premiere or something like that. I only conducted many new pieces in symphony concert. And that was always my process, that I study score first and then have a conversation. And nowadays, because many composers want to make a big orchestra. So like the orchestration is so big, that means like you have that big score written in, I don't know, even I can't read it with my glass. So it takes a little time to prepare that, but then figure it out in the structure. It's just the same thing. How about you, Greg? Because if it's opera, we really have to have an imagination because we haven't seen it before.
Well, I think I've worked on at least 15 world premieres, and very often casting from before I've even seen a score, and so it's a very interesting. I love to have the score always, when possible, and so often it is a lot of conversation with the composer. I have worked with a lot of first-time opera composers, and so there's not always a deep understanding of voices and how they work. And so sometimes it has been talking about the difference between range and tessitura, as well as orchestration levels depending on what. And then I try to talk to them and ask them what their imagination is, the sound that they have, and what is the character like in their mind, and if I can then bring something to them, because sometimes it is they're looking for inspiration to write for somebody, and then other times they're writing for somebody, they have the part and I go and find it. So it's been a mix each time, and sometimes I've had to definitely talk people down off of ledges after like not understanding the difference between range and tessitura, and she said she had high E's, and I said yes, a high E, but not 20 or 20 in a row, and so that's the difference. And they would get so angry, but she told me, and I said, well, she did tell you, but you heard something else than what she maybe said, and so it's a lot of collaboration that way, especially if they don't know voices. Of course, if they do know voices, my job becomes that much easier, and then it's about what their imagination is, who the character is, and who can learn it on the time that we have, and who's available, and that covers.
Thank you, Philippe.
Well, thank you.
That was a great question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
I think we have Ashley Marie Robillard coming on, and Ashley will be our Susanna next summer in our Nozze di Figaro. And she's a Juilliard student, right? Or Curtis.
Yes.
She's Curtis. I'm waiting to hear you, darling. We need to get your
still
sound
on
up.
mute, Ashley.
You hear me now?
There you are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I went to Curtis. My partner went to Juilliard.
That's right.
Yeah, so I am always really curious about moments of really beautiful growth that can be born from time spent outside of one's comfort zone. And I was wondering if there are any particular projects that, for the both of you, that you either conducted or produced that you spent a good amount of time outside of your comfort zone, but felt some like really great experiences of growth and satisfaction on the other end of them.
What does it mean, comfort zone?
It means where you're comfortable, maybe it was a modern piece that was in a style that really irritated you or something, out of your comfort zone.
One of your sort of a bigger challenge of something you've never done before, maybe, or done in a certain way.
Or isn't as natural.
Might be a comfort zone. Yeah. That's a very interesting question. Because it's in opera, I feel like I spend a lot of my time outside of the comfort zone just by putting things together on a day-to-day basis. But I don't have to say, so I think I've worked on 4 ring cycles so far in 3 different companies. And I was a kid, when I started to have to cast ring cycles for the first time. And this is an immense kind of project, and in some ways there was a raised eyebrows when it was handed to me, or to do that, because what does he know about the ring, or this is too big kind of thing, and getting used to arguments, sometimes with collaborators, that takes me out of my comfort zone. I'm a consensus builder, and I want people to, opera is the most collaborative art form on so many different concepts coming into one. I like to be very collaborative in the way we do that. So if any, I guess the comfort zone, lack of comfort zone could be difficult collaborations that we still have to get to the finish line with. And I think those are the ones that I have learned the most from, because we don't see eye to eye, and yet we have a huge amount of work to do together. And we have to find the common ground, and respect for each other, even if maybe that's difficult. So I don't know if I would say, it's this title or that title, but those are the aspects that I've learned the most from, and not giving up on my beliefs, that I'm holding on to, as well as being open to hearing other perspectives and trying to find common ground along that way, and realizing we still might not find it in the end, but we can still remain respectful and keep that. towards the end, even if we don't see eye to eye, and maybe still won't like each other at the end, but we can still respect each other and find that way, and in many ways still create an amazing product, even if it hasn't been a marriage made in heaven.
Eun Sun, you're out of your comfort zone.
Well, it's not about peace, but I think it was only possible because I'm conductor, not a singer. But I had once, it was 2015, I think. I had 6 performances in a week in 3 different cities, in 3 different, or with 3 different pieces. There was Berlin, Ballo in Maschera, Stockholm, Butterfly, and Dresden, Bohème. And it was like Dresden, Berlin, Stockholm, Dresden, Stockholm, Berlin, or something like that in a week. So I had to fly like at 6 a.m. in the morning after the performance, where I can't go to sleep so early. So I ended up like sleep only 2 hours maybe each night. Yeah. And then flying to other city, and then like having some rest. And then I really thought I was afraid to not to give my best on each evening, because it's only possible in Europe, and it's only possible because I'm a conductor. The singers can't do that, of course. But then in that week, I think I really learned how to concentrate and how to live that moment. Like, I thought like I was kind of divided into personality. Yeah. One in the performance and one who is traveling. So, and of course I had 3 different, not only pieces, but 3 different casts as well, because in Europe you can meet all different casts in different evening. So that was kind of a moment where I lived in the performance, but also believed in live performance, the power of live performance, because it changed a lot. So yeah, I think that moment was kind of the hardest, but I enjoyed most. Yeah,
that's a good one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley.
And we have a fellow countryman of yours coming on.
I'm saying
we have Woo Young Yun coming on. Here he comes. Hello.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. Hi, my name is Woo Young Yun, and I would like to ask if I can ask personal question to both of you. I would like to hear during your long journey to reach to that the one of the most important position in this opera world, what was the most meaningful, heartwarming moment that you had in your music career?
Ooh. Wow.
I have to say, because since we were talking about the position, when I say it in the interviews as well, the interviewer don't believe that. And many people like saying a little boring, but I am someone who never has, how should I say, the place that I want to go. For instance, like a young artist, they always say like, well, the Met is my goal, or Berlin Philharmonic for the conductors, or something like that. I never thought, I don't know why, it's my personality. I think, and my agent said to me, you're one of the most curious and strange person who never asks at the agent where I am going. I never think about that. So also the position as we know, Greg, it was meant to be, but I never thought about a position. Well, someday it will be good when I can have an orchestra or something like that. But I didn't know that the position was vacant. Position was empty when I got in San Francisco, as you know. So it's not like I'm aiming certain position or certain place or opera house or I just live today. Of course, I plan my future, but most important thing for me is to really live today and do my best for what I'm doing now. And that's, in that sense, I think in every performance, I feel it really meaningful and heartfelt, because you can never produce the same thing twice. Whenever you do La Boheme today, tomorrow will be different to La Boheme. And tomorrow you are a day older already. And next year you're a year older. Everybody is getting older every day. So it's all different. So in that sense, I really give much meaning for myself as well in every single moment. Yeah.
I want you to know that Woo Young had to be in the Korean army, of course.
Mhm.
And he had learned the La Boheme score. So he would start, when he would start his 5-mile marches or 5-hour marches, whatever, he would start singing the La Boheme score and sing the whole score as he marched.
Wow. That's great.
That's my boy. So Greg, your inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to say that too, along the way, I didn't have a plan of getting here, of all places. You know, I started out with wanting to be surrounded by music, you know, and that was it. And that's still where I am, and that makes me the happiest I can be. It wasn't, you know, while I had a bigger picture, it wasn't about being in charge. It's never been about being in charge. It's more about being sharing with people and sharing in music. And I guess the most special moments for me have been when I've taken a chance on a new talent and I have seen them flourish and have amazing success. And that is when my heart is just full of joy and ready to explode, because I got it right. And I wasn't sure, maybe, like it was a little bit of like, this could work if I'm right, but God, I hope I am right, I'm right. Like I'm an artist. I question myself constantly every single day about everything I do. I don't think like, oh, because I'm here at top of San Francisco Opera, I know what I'm doing. I'm still figuring it out every single day. And I question myself constantly. You'd be surprised how much I question how I do what I do and what I'm doing. So when I see it happen, when I see it become magic, that is the most special time for me.
Great, Kristen.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Woo Young, it's so nice to see you.
Thank you.
Bye
Great to
bye.
talk to
Good
you all.
to see you,
Thank
Woo Young.
you. Good to see you.
Well, I think that was the last of our questions. But before we go, I wanted to just ask the two of you, you have to work together. And when did you meet? And did you immediately have a connection when you met each other?
I think so.
Yeah. We met actually in Houston.
Yeah.
Right? That was the first time where I conducted in Resilient Theater in the George Brown Convention Center after Hurricane Harvey.
Oh, yes.
In Houston. And Greg visited, actually, it was the dress rehearsal.
Yeah, we met in the intermission of the dress rehearsal.
Right. So we
Caesar.
met there. And then
Yeah.
I think so. We felt immediately.
Day one on rehearsal, I was like, hey, you know, but and while Eun Sun didn't know that we were looking for a music director, I knew that we were looking for a music director, but very subtly, very cool style-wise, you know, not too overbearing or desperate. You know, we're testing things out. And I was excited, you know, as you say, things are meant to be. And we had a repertoire change, and then we had a change in conductor. And then all of a sudden, you know, there was a time to rethink. And I had been hearing so many amazing things about Eun Sun and from colleagues and heard some interviews that she'd done and was so excited to meet her in Houston, and then kind of came together. And then finally, when we got to work together, it was like, well, this is beyond even my greatest imagination of what this could be like from day one, you know. And it had been a long time since I had been in such a magical rehearsal room. And it just felt so wonderful. And again, like I was saying, one of those heartwarming moments where you're not sure, but this could be something. Well, we're going to have to wait a couple of years to find out. That's the other part of it. And then when it happens and you think, no one could have planned, the universe took care of it. Thank you. You know, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we thank both of you tremendously for spending your time and for getting up so early, Eun Sun, even though I know you're an early riser in Korea. I know that now. But thanks to both of you. And I have to say, I think the San Francisco Opera is a very lucky opera company. So we have you both. So thank you so much. And I will now do a little housekeeping here on my part.
Okay.
I have to say, I want to remind our public about the 2021 preview From Mozart to Surreal. The date is going to be announced, but you will get a behind the scenes preview of Marilla's 2021 summer productions, which would have been this summer if we'd been lucky. Mozart's sublime classic opera Le Nozze di Figaro, and Dominic Argento's surreal 20th century gem, The Postcard from Morocco. Panelists will include myself, Mr. Mark Morash, and the heavenly dramaturg Kip Krenna, who knows more about all of this than any of us. So come and learn more about these exciting works, and come and hear from us what makes it exciting for us to produce these works. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you to my Marilini for asking their wonderful questions. And I'll see them in the morning. And thank you so much for your attendance here. Thanks.